Good morning, everybody. Good to see you. This is the early crew. This is the people that turn up to Zoom meetings a minute early.
Dan.
The greatest. Kane, well done.
Good to see you, mate.
Good to see you too. Good to see you. Richard, how you doing? There in Sydney?
G'day, g'day.
Awesome. Welcome, Brendan, Tanya. This is going to be fun. We're going to see who the camera on versus camera off people, and there's some good reasons to have your camera off. We've got some school holidays, people joining. We've got kids running around the background, so people staying there with cameras off, which would be cool. Do we have any good Christmas plans while we're waiting for people? We're just going to buy ourselves a bit of time. Then I've got some good holiday plans coming up. I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but I think Matron's got a white Christmas happening over there in London. Has anyone else got any good plans coming up? Hey,
Mate, I'm
I'll
I'm
take
off I'm off
anything
to
at
the
this point.
beach. I'm off to the beach.
So good. Now that is the voice of DevCost International. Is that you, Nuru?
Yeah, that's me. So my camera is off. I'm on my phone at the moment because the boardroom's all taken up. So sorry about that.
No, no, all good. So good. Welcome. Tanya, what's happening over at Pattern? You guys got a bit of Christmas leave coming up?
Yeah, I'll be visiting my family briefly. So heading up to Sydney, which will be
Awesome.
nice. And Owen's going home to Ireland.
Yeah, so I'll be having a white Christmas this year.
Okay,
It'll be good.
that's
Good
cool.
to get home.
So good. Amazing. We got any other international people traveling international for Christmas?
My
Wow.
sister showed up from Canada to surprise me.
Wow.
So she's here now.
That's
That's
cool.
exciting. She won't be here for Christmas though.
Okay. That's very exciting. Guys, well, this is a great turnout early on, which is cool. We weren't sure how many minutes we're going to have to buy. Um, by kicking off, I was thinking we'll throw to Owen, you for a dad joke, but I can see I don't think you're in the boardroom. I don't think you have your books of dad jokes with you. Sometimes this is how we buy time in our Pattern meetings. Shout out to the team at Pattern. Actually, have you guys recovered from Black Friday? Have you recovered? No.
Not quite. We're close.
Okay. It was a big Black Friday probably for them in many other accounts, but certainly for the Thankyou account, it was a big one. I think we sold more in the 4 days than we did our first 3-4 months of trading. So there you go. Black Friday is a thing. Cyber Monday. Be good. Well done. All right, friends. Well, I think we're going to kick into this. First of all, thank you everyone for coming. It is a busy time of year. It is Christmas. There are so many physical events, Zoom events. We were in part reluctant to put this in, but also in part looking forward to putting this in because this isn't just another Zoom call for us at Thank You. It's a chance for all of us to get grounded again on why we are all together, why we're connected, why we do what we do. And like I said in my email that went out, sometimes in the busyness of it all, it is so easy to forget our impact and what unites us and what drives us. So we'll get a chance to cover it off today, and we're going to be having, I don't want to talk it up too much, but a great interview, I think, a great interview from Pete. If you don't know Pete Yao, our head of impact, I feel like you all know Pete. The best way I can describe Pete is he's like Thankyou's Oprah. Like if we had an Oprah in our team, it's Pete. He's like one of the greatest interviewers of all time, like Oprah. He gives the money away like Oprah. Do you know what I'm saying? Just everyone gets money, and he's also he's an incredibly hard worker, and behind that smile is a lot of diligence. And I know for Printy and the team at DevCost, you guys are seeing the detail of that when it comes to RBGs. I know Aerie, we've got you on the call, and this is an interview, but at any point, if you just want to sort of share your feelings on Pete, how it's really going between you and him, you're welcome. This is a safe space. We're a team here. We'll take feedback. We're into feedback here. Thank you. But Pete's going to be interviewing Aerie, who's coming in from Spain. It's about 11 p.m. there. Pete did, speaking of diligence, a briefing call with Aerie at 7 a.m. Aerie's time. So Aerie woke up to Pete. He's going to bed. There's a lot of Pete here, but I'm really looking forward to seeing this conversation where it goes, because as a society, we sort of have a funny ranking system on how we value different things and different roles. I was watching a very interesting interview yesterday. I'm not sure if anyone saw the interview with Elon Musk at the Dell conference. It may be one of his most controversial interviews of all time. He said some very interesting things, quite clickbaity, but he said some other quite profound things. And I was just watching that interview and reflecting how so often as a society we do hero the, let's say, entrepreneurialism, these leaders who risk a lot. So financially, they take big risks. They put family on the line, life on the line, and many of them end up with some pretty great rewards. The millions of dollars and so on. And as a society, this is one thing we hero. I think one thing over the years that has blown my mind in Thankyou has been when we have got to meet our leaders from our impact partners all around the world, because they have taken huge risk financially, personally. They've put family and life on the line, and they've done it all for the benefit of others. And this morning or this evening, depending on where you're coming in from, you're going to get to hear from a remarkable man, someone who has taken huge risk for the benefit of humanity. He is a pioneer. Pete's going to officially introduce him, but this is the pre-intro to the intro. But look, I think for all of us, do your best right now. Switch off from the day-to-day. Try turn off the notifications. I'm going to flip my phone over and just give the attention to Thankyou's Oprah and to Aerie. So Pete, over to you. Round of applause. Let's welcome these guys.
Thanks, Dan.
Great work.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for spending a bit of your Wednesday morning or Tuesday evening with us. Just to reframe the conversation as well, as you all know, we're focused on fighting extreme poverty through our incredible partners like Aerie. And just to also have a quick snapshot on our first allteam, to provide a bit of hope, like over 100 years ago, 77% of our world lived in extreme poverty. In 96, that was about 1/3, so 36%. And today, less than 9% do. So there's a downward trajectory of people living in poverty, which is really exciting. That 9% still represents around 719 million people that live on less than $2.15 a day. They're more likely to die from childbirth. They're more likely to die under the age of 5, be deprived of education, as well as live in very severely deprived living conditions. But as we're going to meet Aerie and his awesome organization called Nuru International, they are incredible, dedicated organizations all around the world who use evidence. They work with proximate leaders to address sustainability issues, and they think critically about the causes of poverty, versus tackling symptoms. So I'd love to introduce Aerie without any fanfare. There's a bit of an introduction, Aerie. It wasn't ChatGPT. This is something I actually did on a LinkedIn stalk. So Aerie doesn't know this, but I'm going to try and introduce him and set him up to everyone. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Nuru International. Nuru International helps farmers, particularly those living in conflict-adjacent zones, fight extreme poverty through sustainable agricultural programs. He served as a Peace Corps volunteer in northern Burkina Faso and has been part of Nauru's leadership since Nauru's earliest days. Aerie holds a master's in international conflict analysis, speaks 7 languages, which if you're a Q&A kind of person, you can test him on his ability to speak 7 languages, and brings incredible wisdom, humility in the space. We are very, very grateful for Aerie to be able to join us on this course. So without further ado, please welcome Aerie. Aerie, first things first, you're in Spain. What time is it in Spain at the moment?
It's 11:10. So we're still
11.
the times.
You shared a secret. This is going not on topic, but you shared a secret with us in terms of Spanish culture and how there is a secret to staying up so late. Would you like to share that secret with us in hopes that we can maybe implement this in our workplace policy as well?
Yeah, I really embrace the siesta. So if you can indulge, it's prior to Spain, I'd lived in Italy for a long time, and their siesta is considerably longer. I think it takes up most of the day. The Spanish siesta seems about the right size. It's roughly 2 hours a day that you can use for napping.
Oh, that is, did you hear that, Daniel? That is something we'll be instituting right as of today. But yeah, thanks so much. I really appreciate your time. We're going to jump into it. Nuru is doing some incredible work. We're going to hear more about their work a bit later on. But I'm really curious, as a leader, probably a pioneer in this space as well, what drew you to it, starting, or sorry, I should say leading an organization like Nuru? And like, where this why, we talk about the importance of why, where does the why come from for you?
Yeah, thanks. We internally in Nuru talk about our why a lot. It's the first question I ask anyone who's applying for a job with us. It's really because we face hard stuff in our line of work. As Pete said, we work in conflict adjacent areas. There's a lot of risk, as Daniel was saying, in the type of work we do. And so you need to have that clarity around what's going to keep you going when things get tough or when they get really, really rough. Funnily enough, as Pete and I were talking about doing this interview, I'm like, we're both heavy introverts. This is going to be interesting. And so I don't talk about my why a lot externally. And I'll maybe kind of explain why in a second. I'm a pretty reserved person, and I'll give you context for that. But there's another reason too. So pretty traumatic events led to me being here. And it's kind of become part of my identity. And I kind of struggle with kind of telling the same story too many times where I kind of lose that hurt. And I haven't really ever figured out a way to do it and become really smooth and kind of I don't know, polished in my delivery of it. And I've kind of always shied away from doing that. So I guess in some ways, sorry that you don't get that polished of a version. But kind of with that, I'll start with, I had a pretty unconventional childhood. It was wonderful. I have amazing parents, but unconventional, nevertheless. So my dad was an undercover narcotics officer. And so from my earliest memory to the time I left home, we were all undercover. And we were raised kind of with the knowledge that any day could be our worst day. Any day, it could be my dad's last day. Any day, it could be all of our last days. But we still had to move forward and live life, be kids, try to be normal. And so when I say I'm pretty reserved, I mean it. Public speaking and talking about these things is kind of against everything that I was raised to kind of do. But it's an important part of my role, and it's an important part about sharing some of these challenges that people face. So, you know, I won't say growing up undercover was hard and, you know, really rough. And a lot of people have a lot of ideas around what that might look like. If it's what you grow up with and it's all you ever knew, it's normal. And, you know, in another setting, probably more like a pub or something, I would kind of talk about what it's like to grow up and every single person thinks you're a criminal and that your dad's a drug dealer. and the career advice your guidance counselor gives you when he thinks that your family are narcos. My brother's a lawyer, so that kind of was part of the advice he gave to our family. But you know, I think for today, it's more important to talk about how it's kind of prepared me for this line of work. And so growing up the way I did really taught me a lot about risk. And Daniel, you were just opening with it. It's something that is part of our work, but I grew up kind of innately knowing it. You know, how to accept risk, how to make decisions when there's a lot on the line. And I talk to my team a lot about this. It's how to move forward when you're staring into the abyss of where there is absolute chaos and horror and everything on the other end, but we still need to make decisions and we still need to move forward. Funnily enough, my mom always asks, like, how did you end up in this line of work? And my dad looks at her like, what are you talking about? This is very normal for us. But you know, it's this, my childhood prepared me for this. And so, you know, typically I pause there for a moment, Pete. If people have questions around that, I don't want to derail it, but typically people are like, okay, that's an unconventional childhood.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing. And maybe in sort of the interest of time as well, and also great to pause for questions and how maybe questions and answers will work. So we're going to have dedicated time at the end for Q&A. Love it. I mean, if anyone wanted to ask more about Aerie's story, inclusive of his undercover, let's save it to there. Let's post it in the chat as well. We'd love for that to happen. But I know, Aerie, that was one of the first pivotal moments before another pivotal moment happened to yourself in Burkina Faso. Would you like to share with everyone that side?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, like I said, growing up that way, I never really got to be me. I was always kind of living undercover. And so after secondary school, I saved up money, decided I was going to move abroad. At that point, I'd never been outside of the country, but said, you know, I'll be back in a year. Ended up being 12 or so. I think my mom keeps count better than I do. But it was, you know, at that point, part of my time abroad, I was living throughout Europe and Sub-Saharan Africa. Part of that time was in the Peace Corps. My dad was a tunnel rat in Vietnam, and both my parents really kind of imparted on our family kind of this notion of a life of service. And so I joined the Peace Corps. I think it's equivalent to Australia's volunteer program. So what it's called in Australia?
That's right. Yeah.
And I served in northern Burkina Faso. And I'll share a map. I'll do a screenshot. Let's see if this works. So this is Burkina Faso. I lived up there north in the Sahel Desert. And I lived with semi-nomadic peoples up there. And originally, I was there to teach bookkeeping, but things quickly changed. So my first week, locusts wiped out our village. And at that point in my life, you know, I grew up in Southern California. I didn't really know locusts still existed. And within hours, you know, not a leaf on a branch, not a blade of grass, was there. And, you know, it quickly sunk in that this was going to be rough. But I thought, okay, well, it can't get worse than this. This is, you know, at biblical proportions already. Like it really can't get worse. Then the next week, illness started sweeping through our village. And then I got really sick. I got hepatitis A, and I'm a meter 9'3" and about 110 kilos. And I got down to about 70 in a few weeks. I have a picture just for, let's see if I can do it quick. Sharing. Let's focus. And there's me. So my skin turned yellow, my eyes turned yellow, my hair kind of got white. But on the plus side, I was told that my teeth really popped. And it was you know, really, really, I'd never been that sick. And then, you know, I thought, okay, well, things can't get worse than this. You know, and then drought took hold in the village, and animals started to die. And we had 6 pumps in our village, but none of them worked. We had to walk, you know, a couple kilometers just to get water, and we were rationed with our water. So a 22-liter jerry can, kind of the big yellow jerry cans, we were allowed half of those per person per day for washing, cleaning, cooking, everything. And when you spilled your water, you literally cried, just because it was so hard. And you know, you then think, oh, it can't get worse than this. And then famine came, and really nothing can be worse than that. You know, and my service was really just kind of a glimpse into what communities like this endured. And I stayed there because really I was the only one who had a choice to go. And that experience kind of forged me into this line of work. I was originally going to be a diplomat, but you can't really go back to that after this. And so, you know, kind of in summing up kind of this why piece, you know, I used to think about extreme poverty as really having fewer options. You know, it's just fewer of whatever maybe I had or other people would have. But what I came to see during my time in Burkina Faso was that it was more about having no good options. And that's really helped frame kind of Nuru's focus.
Thank you for sharing, Aerie. And yeah, I don't think anyone in our position or in our world can understand what it feels like, what it looks like as well to be living in conditions like this. And I think everyone has our whys on like why we're, you know, working at Thankyou or Pattern or what have you. And I think that drives us to do things that we're doing right now. So I'm curious on how this experience has formed you into your leadership at Nuru, and how Nuru thinks about its mission, its vision, and just getting up each and every day. So maybe let's start with like, what does Nuru do? Like, who do you think Nuru is reaching at the moment?
So we really focus on the hard to reach spots. You know, now I find myself talking much more about conflict and instability than I ever have. And it's kind of for obvious reasons. It's palpable. It's kind of seems like it's everywhere right now. But it's particularly true in West Africa. You know, if you guys have seen the news around just the number of coups that have happened. But then you also have this convergence of extreme poverty, climate change, terrorist insurgencies, all of these factors kind of intertwined, and it's reinforcing this instability and this poverty. And really, there isn't a clear backstop to the kind of spread. And so, you know, when we think about it in our work, we kind of think about it a lot like erosion control, if that makes sense. Of if people aren't planting, if people aren't staying in their communities, then it's just going to keep sliding and going further and further. And so we try to build footholds. And I can try another screenshot in a minute to share some satellite imagery because it kind of drives home the point. So when I talk about kind of planting seeds of hope, if you think about the act of planting a seed, as a farmer, you are doing so with the hope that you will be there to harvest it. So if farmers aren't planting, that tells you what's going on. And so on the left this is our operating area in northeastern Nigeria during the times of Boko Haram. So on the left, you see kind of the pre-state, all the green is where people used to plant their crops. And then on the right is after the occupation of Boko Haram. And this is people's main livelihood. And so I just use that because it's such a strong visual example of where you see just the decrease in planting and then what transpires from that. But then there's, you know, another side of this kind of erosion control or planting kind of the seeds. It's once a place is deemed too risky, and it's really hard to define, but once it kind of gets that air of this place is just too risky to invest, it follows a pattern. And I saw it in Burkina Faso a few years ago. I drove down from Burkina to northern Ghana, and it's starting to happen there too. It's first, you know, there's the fear of insurgents or instability, then investment stops. Then the NGOs stop getting funding. Then the projects stop. Then the staff lose their jobs, and then the people leave. And no problems get better through neglect. And so what you see happen is these areas then just start to the instability spreads or the conflict spreads.
Yeah, and maybe for those in the call this is the first time hearing insurgency, terms like Boko Haram, terms like fragility and conflict adjacent. Can you unpack a bit about what that is, and also why that's really important with Nuru's mission on extreme poverty? Like what are the linkages? Because I think we can hear conflict, turn on the news, it's like, that's another violent warlord or coup. But actually, like, why is extreme poverty and why is fragility so intertwined, and why do they actually need to be addressed together?
Yeah, so I think the easiest way to talk about an insurgency, it's a competition between the insurgent, which for the purposes of this, we can use kind of synonymously with like a terrorist organization, because often they are kind of one and the same. So if we're talking about Boko Haram or Al-Qaeda, it's a competition between them and the state for the support of the local population. And it's really at that competition level that Nuru works to try and reinforce states, because really every community, every family needs to make a decision of who do they think is going to be there longer, because that's who they're going to have to deal with. But it's this, you know, how it intertwines with extreme poverty is what we've seen happen across the Sahel, so kind of the center part of West Africa. It isn't ideological. It isn't a Salafi jihadist form of Islam that has always been there. You know, people try to put narratives of these conflicts have always existed. They haven't. This is quite new. But what we're seeing happen is that vulnerable communities, people vulnerable because they are extremely poor, or they've had no real functioning state ever, or they're just marginalized groups. They're a different ethnic group than the rest of the country. They're able to be radicalized, and these groups prey on those groups to really start that competition between the state.
Yeah, and I know that as we're just following on from conflicts from an Australian perspective, like we obviously see a couple of the big ones in Europe, a couple of ones happening in the Middle East now. There's this sense of like hopelessness where I think we can sort of nail that. This is the effect of conflict, and to everything that you say, like leads extreme poverty communities into becoming more fragile, more vulnerable, and therefore these almost these groups and the ideologies can take footholds. And sometimes we can feel really depressed about that and almost like helpless. But I think one of the great things in just sharing a pretty honest view of like your story, your why, as well as who you're reaching and who Nuru is reaching, is then going, okay, like we're not stopping at the problem. We're not just stopping at the issue and acknowledging that, which is important, but we're not letting that define, let's say, our actions and behaviors for the communities themselves. There's this hope. And that's the mission and that's the vision of Nuru. So I'd love for you to unpack, okay, this is the background. This is what you guys are up against, how you're addressing it.
Yeah, sure. So it's, I remain tremendously hopeful with everything that's going on. So the way we work, I'll use kind of just a quick example is kind of the easiest way to kind of put it in concrete terms for people. So we work with farmers, and in every context we work with those farmers to identify the challenges that they're facing, and then work with them to also develop the solutions. So not everywhere looks the same because not everyone's facing the same problems. But it's more, people kind of use the thing, well, are you teaching farmers how to farm? It's much more about teaching farmers how to adapt, because the climate has rapidly changed quickly. And so that, the traditional crops they do no longer work, or fertilizer costs due to the Ukraine war have gone through the roof and now they can't afford fertilizer anymore, or there's a new pest. And so really kind of simply, we bring divided communities together through just common economic interest. I can make you more money if we work together. And so how this played out in northeastern Nigeria, they had been under the caliphate of Boko Haram. And there's this kind of, well, I don't want to put any money there. I don't want to invest in that place because I don't want to build something for someone else to burn. That's the common narrative you hear everywhere. But if it's just left to fester, then the situation will only get worse. And so we worked with the communities there of figuring out, okay, well, how can we start something? We thought security was going to be their top priority. It ranked 11 we surveyed 1,615 people in a place just recently liberated from Boko Haram, and less than 1% of respondents said security was their top issue. It was livelihoods, it was food, it was health, all these things that people think, well, wouldn't security go ahead of that? And the most common line was, well, Boko Haram might kill us, but hunger will. And so we start with women first, and we started small. It was just trying to build trust in the community. When conflict tears a community apart, it's trying to do small actions to build trust on both sides so everyone can get to know how to work together again. So it's household gardens. And from there, it was women weren't ready to leave their compounds yet. It's mixed Christian Muslim society. So there can be restrictions on if women can leave their compounds. And the fields where people used to farm was a prime spot where Boko Haram used to kidnap and rape women. So no one really was ready to go back. And so we started there first. And that was just to get to know each other. And then from that, we looked at, okay, what's your next problem? And you try to build this momentum. And so it was, well, our post-harvest was having issues with pests. So, weevils eating it or mold. And so we worked with them on getting them storage bags. But the idea was to get them to work together. And so it was, we can get these improved crop storage bags for you, but you're going to repay as a group, and you're going to repay using mobile money. Mobile money was new in Nigeria, and so the idea was we can get people to start to work together, and we can get them to start to use a safer method of transferring money to each other and carrying money when there's kind of the lawlessness of kind of a post-conflict setting that's just there. And we had 100% repayment. And we were the first people to kind of be back up there, and everything else was kind of huge, like food aid around us. And we were saying, no, we can start to do work here. And then from there we had crops, and then it grew and grew and grew.
And I mean, excitingly for us, all of our reports, if you wanted to delve deeper into like the impact and the outcomes of Nauru's implementation strategy or programming model, you can read it all on both Nauru's website, our website as well. But can you maybe highlight some of the reports, the impact reports, and the successes that you're seeing as a result of this local, almost like needs assessment, strategic working with communities, partnership, trust, and the outcome of that?
Yeah, some of the things we've recently gotten some news about was, I'll start with Kenya first. So that was our first organization we started like 15 years ago. And we chose a spot that was really heavy, had really heavy cattle rustling. And so people were stealing cows, and it was a really, really violent activity. And it also carried with it intergenerational vendettas, which is kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah.
One generation later, I'm going to attack you for what, and so it's really hard to stop because and we worked with the communities to start hybridizing cattle mainly for economic interest first. So zebu, the traditional form, traditional cows only produce about 1 liter of milk a day, but hybridized cows that we mix with Holsteins and Friesians, we could get 12 liters. We can, our prime is around 20, and then we improve the food. So people don't need to have as many cows, and they get a lot more milk. They get a daily income rather than a seasonal income from crops. But the knock-on effect of where we started getting press from the Kenyan government was that it effectively ended cattle rust. Because if you've ever seen a dairy cow, trying to make a quick getaway with a dairy cow is like trying to push a car on blocks. And it was kind of almost overnight, people realized after a few failed attempts that you can't cattle rustle these cows, which only added to the interest in the community of doing that. So that's just one quick example.
Yeah, no, awesome. And I know just reading through your impact reports as well, there's been like percentages increase in household consumption or income or food security to health benefits. Can you talk about some of those as well?
Sure. Yeah. So in that initial year in Nigeria, we were able to increase income by, I think, about 700%.
Wow.
And then in Kenya, it's year on year, we've been able to, in the dairy program, increase income and yields 7 years in a row. And so that's kind of some of the main reports coming out. And then we're going to be having, we did a longitudinal study that really looked at the connection between building resilience to violent extremist groups and livelihoods, and that'll be released in the coming months.
Yeah, super exciting. So it's working essentially in the hardest of hardest places. It's working, and probably like my question to Nauru would be, what's the secret sauce? Like, how are you guys doing this? Because there could be amazingly motivated people, have really great whys, also have a vision of transforming communities. And you shared a bit of like building trust, a bit of the programming model. But in my estimations, that's very rare. What's the secret sauce? And is it something to do with the fact that you partner very strongly with locally led partners, locally led leaders, and everything that is grounded within like proximate leaders?
Absolutely. None of these challenges that we're we're facing or working against are short-term fixes. And we believe for something to be lasting, it really needs to be local. And so in every spot, not only are we designing the programs there, but we're helping start local organizations, local leaders to really try to keep people able to be productive in their home communities. And so that's really been the core of our model, and we build world-class local organizations. And often we try to partition out how we can help, but also where a lot of our local leaders are best equipped of knowing the history, the context, knowing kind of where we can push and stretch ideas. And then we do a lot of cross-pollination across our organizations. Nuru Burkina Faso just visited Nuru Kenya to see what a full-scale yogurt dairy business looked like that we've been doing there.
Cool.
And it's that cross-pollination that has been really key too.
Yeah, awesome. And we're going to open up some questions as well. I feel like I've been asking a lot of Aerie at the moment, but because we're an allteam and we get to jump on a Zoom, it's not a Zoom webinar. We actually really wanted a Zoom room because we can see all faces, you can interact as well. If anyone can start thinking through, if you had a burning question to ask Aerie, Daniel, myself, feel free to put it in the chat right now. We can sort of like see the levels of interest. We'd love to, get you to unmute and introduce what you do yourself as well. Sorry for all the introverts in the room. That's your scariest thing in the world, but we can do that. Also, like raising your hands, you've got that little raise hand function as well. So maybe start thinking through that. And maybe some of our last questions with yourself, Aerie, would be, I know you visit the field, very, very commonly. Is there any stories that recently has impacted you, or any stories that, you carry with you that you can share with us?
Sure. I'll continue on this introvert line of, so I'd gone up to northeastern Nigeria, and I'm not one for fanfare or celebrations kind of anything that's too high profile and sort of
Yeah.
I really just want to get to the field and see the crops. And the community had set up this kind of regalia, this kind of big scene. And so I was immediately, okay. And I tried to talk with my team, my Nigerian team, like, hey, is this necessary, guys? And kind of sit down and do it. And then they let me know, well, this really isn't for you. You're kind of the excuse, but it's not about you. And it was amazing. The community did a celebration, traditional music, traditional dance. And it was the first time that they had done that since before Boko Haram. And so we're talking 7-8 years. And it was really kind of a retaking of their identity. All of that was kind of banned by Boko Haram. And, talking to older people, it kind of had tears in their eyes of they didn't think they would see it again. And then children having, never seen it. And so it was a pretty amazing moment of where you kind of, it's great to have impact numbers. It's great to have all those things. But then when you see a community kind of regaining that identity, that kind of is a different way of feeling that it's working.
Yeah, wow. Thank you so much, Aerie. I mean, even that story, I feel like is kind of shivers down my spine. And just to be there as well, I imagine that helps solidify what you all do. Love to open for some questions. I'm going to try and take as much time as well to involve everyone in this conversation that wants to be from a question. Maybe Dom, if you want to unmute yourself and maybe ask your question and give Aerie a introduction of where you work, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, as well as what you do there.
Hey, Aerie, thanks so much for sharing what you shared today. It was really great to hear from you. And thanks, Oprah, as well, for doing such a good job. I work in marketing at Thankyou. So I've sat at a few iiMETs before, but this was really great. My question is, everything you do just sounds so well considered. I love the approach that you take. how long does it take you to assess the situation before you act? And then how do you know when you're like, okay, cool, now we're ready, we're going to act?
I guess we used to take a really long time, and we'd kind of keep a roster going. And it was sort of watching trend lines of, are these countries going to kind of enter our roster? Because it's never a good thing if a country's kind of entering the roster. But increasingly now, USAID has asked us to scale to a lot of really hard places very quickly. And so we're using a lot more of our kind of newer collectives, so that all those local organizations to kind of crowdsource a lot of the solutions. One easy part about the Sahel is that because the majority of them are Francophone, a lot of our team members have worked across them. And so it does take a lot of prep work, a lot of security kind of briefing, and typically our whole team watches a lot of regions kind of all the time, and so that helps. But yeah, we're trying to go faster as we try to scale, but it certainly takes a lot of prep.
And maybe to also unpack some of these terms, Aerie. So USAID is our equivalent of DFAT. So they're the largest funder by far of international development and aid. I think they give, billions and billions of dollars. And not, I know Aerie wouldn't want to brag, but back in the day, it was almost like, hey, USAID, we've got this amazing model called Nuru, and we love to take our model because we think it works for extreme poverty and the intersection of like conflict, and we think we can roll it out. Can you give us funding? And from recent reports and recent updates from the area, it's like USAID seeing how well it's working and going, we want to, we're pitching to you to help scale your model across the parts of the Sahel, and also to break down the Sahel. It's a very interesting part of Africa, isn't it, Aerie? You can explain more than I can, but it probably starts anywhere from the eastern side of like that Somalian region, and it kind of cuts across all the way to like central West Africa. And I think when we talk about Africa as a continent, usually a lot of people focus on the eastern side of Africa. So your Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, there's more aid and development that's been deployed there. But that we call it like Francophile states, so the older French occupied or French colonized states like Mali, Guinea, Burkina Faso, where they speak French there. That's a largely forgotten area, and probably an area where if you turn on the news and you Google like the country, you'll hear coup, instability, violence. And so just to break it down, that's exactly where Nuru International is focused and working. And so, yeah, I don't know, Aerie, whether you wanted to add anything to that or?
No, that's exactly right. It's, sometimes I kind of find myself, unfortunately, being likened to the Peace Corps volunteers that I knew who were in Somalia in the 60s. It was like, what was it like back then? Because when I was in Burkina and Peace Corps, it was desperately poor and there was famine, but it was peaceful. And now it's the epicenter for terrorism in sub-Saharan Africa. And the group that I used to live with is the main group that's being radicalized. And so it's seeing this transformation happen, and yeah, but it's really where we're focusing most of our efforts.
Yeah, and it's maybe a good segue into you touching about the group that you stayed with. There's a question from Sonia. Sonia from Kind Regards. Would you like to unmute and share your who you work for, what you all do, and then the question?
Well, it's Sonia and Kate, and I'll actually hand over to Kate because it's her question.
Well, thank you for sharing your story, and you have the most interesting childhood. And I wondered if you had any friends, like you kept friends from your childhood, because obviously if you had to move around at the drop of a hat, did you then have to?
You couldn't tell them who you really
leave
were.
your life behind?
So fortunately, we didn't really have to move. My dad had a whole elaborate system of car changes. And so we we grew up in Orange County. And so people just didn't know what to make of us. And so they just thought we were drug dealers. And so I would say I have friends from childhood, not many close. It was very amusing when I went to my 20-year reunion and people all realized that I wasn't a drug lord. And so, yeah.
Did you recruit any of them to the work that you do now?
I would say Orange County is a pretty hard place to recruit for NGO work.
You're unique.
Awesome. Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Sonia, as well. We have one question from Amber.
Hi, Aerie. For everyone else's context, I work alongside Pete with Thankyou, so I've met with and worked with Aerie before. I was just curious about how, obviously, you're going into communities and looking at proposed solutions. What is the process for, or how does the team and the community respond when, say, something isn't as successful as hoped? How does that work, and how's the community involvement with the team throughout that process?
No, great question. It happens a lot. As part of our values as an organization, we believe in fail fast, learn fast. And so a lot of times it'll be someone has an idea, they want to try something. So we do small pilots of it. And we try to contain it. So we're not putting all of our eggs in that basket. But, I can remember crops that haven't been successful. I can remember, kind of things like that. But really it's, there's so many factors. And so it's always kind of keeping honest with yourselves and doing third-party evaluation of, no matter how much I like it, if it doesn't work, we can't do it. And so it's a big part of it.
And maybe to chime in as well, just working with Nuru and seeing how they think about evidence, and how when we say we fail fast and then we pivot, a lot of the underpinning is actually we need to measure what success and failure looks like. So there's a rigor around measurement. There's a rigor around, here are targets, here are milestones. And just like businesses across this room, you'll know that maybe the most successful way of thinking through iteration is benchmarking and seeing cool, are we on track or are we not? And so it's the same philosophy as well with Nuru. My question to you, Aerie, as we wind up and finish would be, what keeps you up at night? Aerie, I know you shared a bit about some of the context, some of the solutions, but write us off today, Wednesday, the 6th of December. What's keeping you up at night? Apart from me telling you, please speak to our team, and you're losing sleep right now on that.
So I can answer it two ways. And Pete and I were talking about this a little bit, I guess this morning for me, yesterday for you. The US State Department has asked me to put together a worst case scenario for the Sahel over a 3-year period. And it's, when you think through worst case, the amount of coups and the potential for the spread of insurgency is remarkable. And I really see everything really hinging on the war in Ukraine. And that is going to influence Russia's activities in the Sahel, because the Wagner group, which is the paramilitary group, that they're heavily involved in the Sahel. So that's kind of the other one. But that's the one I can't control directly. The one that I think about as an organization is and I'm sure everyone here can kind of grab onto, is we're growing fast as an organization. In Burkina Faso, we started last year with 3 people. This year we have 30. And then USAID has asked us to go to a lot more countries, and I'm kind of calling it like a buckshot of Russian dolls, because each one of those is going to then have to grow to go from 3 to 30. And so maintaining culture is really kind of top of mind for me. And how do we do that? Well, it's still kind of authentic to us, and it's not, I never want us to become diluted in terms of our impact, or in terms of just what we do, because there's too much at risk. There's too much at stake.
And I think brilliantly put, Aerie around growing pains, and I think everyone in the room really identifies with sort of like, hey, it's really important. Like, we need to solve the growing pains. We need to solve operational capacity, capabilities, resourcing, human resourcing, cultural, like making sure that when you're recruiting a fair bit of people, like they all share the same cultural identity from a Nuru culture, like from a Nuru, like, hey, you know, we believe in integrity. Like, this is the way that we operate, you know. And maybe my hope is one day, you're doing like a mission purpose driven organization with some of the toughest places, and maybe reduce, let's say, reduce pay or charity pay rates as compared to, let's say, the industry of, like, if you're trying to hire really great ops people, really great supply chain people, really great thinkers as well from Stanford, MIT, or what have you, to solve some of the world's most pressing and urgent problems, you're doing it at like maybe 10% of the budget that your big Googles and Microsoft can have. And so I think actually for us, it's this posture of like, hey, we can learn a lot from you on how you're cracking that egg and how you're actually attracting people, how you're doing culture, how you're doing ops. So I think that's a worthwhile conversation, that we can all learn from you in the near future. I know we're coming to the end of it. Kirk, you've asked a question as well. I might maybe ask you to share that, maybe briefly, and then I know Daniel wants to also have a bit of time with us at the end. So, Kirk, if you are still there.
Sure. Yeah, I'll be really quick. Sorry, I'm at the airport, Aerie. But look, a real quick question, because we've heard so much about COVID and how hard that hit extreme poverty. And what was that like for you guys? Was the challenge even greater? Did you overcome it? And any examples through that period?
Yeah. So we were pretty, coincidentally, pretty well prepared for COVID. We've been remote since we started, and we're decentralized in how we make decisions. Each of our local organizations have their own management structures. And so we weren't interrupted in terms of people couldn't travel places and that disrupted. We're already set up to be able to function under those ways. Challenges arose from, I'd say, honestly, everyone got a bit weird during COVID. I think as a global population. And so seeing kind of just the disconnect more from donors to the places we're serving, or communities from each other, just because they weren't, Kenya, often people were on heavy lockdowns, not to the state of maybe stage of Australia, but pretty considerable. And so those lasting effects we've seen, and then the economic effects, definitely.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, Aerie, sorry, Pete. Just to kind of wrap that up, Aerie, thank you so much. I think for all of us on the call, it is hard sitting here on Zoom to get the full context of this. Often when we think about visiting Aerie and the team, one of the great challenges is most of the countries and the regions that they're working in, Australia has a very clear do not travel, high risk, and all the other NGOs are pulling out because it's high risk region, and then extra high risk for Westerners and for for NGO team as well. So there is we've on other calls talked about just how they process team going in, and the training they go through, and it's just it's a lot. I thought to say thank you. We're just going to all jump off mute if you can, if you're in an appropriate environment. Let's just give Aerie and the team a big kind of Zoom clap, which will be. Aerie, thank you so much. Thank you so much. To wrap up in the last 60 seconds here, friends, allteam is all of us as a team working on Thankyou. Thank you for each part that you are doing. Our goal is to grow our funding, to back Aerie and others, and the incredible change makers working to help end extreme poverty in some of the toughest places. Pete, Chantal, and Rachel are actually going to be heading over on a trip around now to the DRC, but that got cancelled due to a terrorist attack targeting Westerners, and so their trip's been pushed to February, and we're trying to figure out how to, for all of us, it's cool seeing Pete on Zoom here in Australia, but what does that look like connecting us all literally with our impact partners? I think today was a great pivot considering everything that's been happening, in the region, and it's a further reminder to the world is tough, but there is hope, and that's because of people like you, Aerie, and the team, but each of you on the call working to help change this. So we look forward to seeing you guys next time we jump on a Zoom call, and then one day again in person for all team. We have been scouting venues, which has been a bit of fun. I'm going to throw it back to you, Pete, because you got your hand up.
Yeah. So I had one quick thing as well, and just echoing everything Dan's saying. Aerie, thank you so much for sharing. Where can we reach you to learn more about your work and also interact with Nuru? I know a lot of us are business leaders as well, and just looking at supporting really great high impact organizations. Like, where can we find Nuru essentially?
Yeah, our website's probably the best spot, newinternational.org. And we're on all the social medias as well. But always happy for a chat. Feel free to reach out.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks you so much, Aerie. We'll send a follow-up email as well so you can reach it. But yeah, thank you everyone for your time. And much love. Thanks everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thanks, Aerie.
Guys.
Thank you.